Right. Where did my window go? Hi, everybody. This is Miss Ray from the Great Falls Public Library, and I am here with Katie and Brooke. Is Brooke here too?
She is.
Hi, Brooke.
Hi.
I'm here with Katie and Brooke from ZooMontana, and they are going to share some fabulous scaly friends with us today. You know them, you love them, reptiles. We're talking about snakes, turtles, and lizards. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to them and their fantastic scaly friends. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us. We are super excited to be showing you some fun animals today. And before we get started, just like last week, I'm going to let you know, there you go, making us big so we can see. Okay, I'm going to let you know, we're not going to bring anything dangerous today. However, as she mentioned, we may have an animal you don't like a snake or a lizard or a turtle. And if you don't like them, that's totally fine. We don't judge. But I want you to know that you're safe, we are safe. And I want you to try to learn something about them, even if you're not their biggest fan. Because even if we don't like an animal or are scared of them, they still have an incredibly important role to play in their habitat. Now, if you have questions at any time during this program, you can drop them in the comments on Facebook Live on your end. And Miss Ray I will ask her for questions after each animal, so you can write them down at any time. And then we will just go through all of that. I tend to talk fast because I get excited, but hopefully you'll get to see some fun animals. What we'll probably do is have them on the counter here or in our arms, and we'll bring the camera close to us so you get a nice up close and personal view of the scaly critters that we have with us. Now, the animals that you're meeting today, as Ray said, are reptiles. Reptiles are typically defined as animals that have dry, scaly skin, so they're not slimy unless they've been in the water. They have dry, scaly skin. They are cold-blooded. They typically lay eggs, though not all of them do, and most of them don't stick around to help parent their babies. So these are all different characteristics. These are things that make them different from us as mammals, different from birds, different from the amphibians or insects that we've met, or invertebrates that we've met. On that note of invertebrates, they are vertebrates, which means they do have a backbone, just like we do. And they have lots of bones throughout their body. We'll talk about that with each of our friends today. Now, if there are no questions, we will go ahead and get started with our first group of reptiles. And I'll let Miss Ray check that, make sure that we don't have questions already. All right. I don't think we do. I haven't heard from her. So we are going to meet our very first animal friend. This here is Rocket. And Rocket is a three-toed box turtle. Now, box turtles are found in a couple places in the world, but they're not super common. And they have a very special adaptation or tool for survival called their box shell. All 300 species of turtles have an excellent shell, but box turtles in particular can close up their shell like a box. And we'll show you how in just a minute. But look how cool this guy is. You see his nice claws up front there. He's got that big beak up front. Much like a bird, he does not have teeth. He just has a beak. So he has to be able to munch on his food using just his beak. This animal is an omnivore, which means he eats just about anything and that'll fit in his beak. You can see his shell there. He's got claws on his feet there. He's covered in dirt because he was digging when I brought him for the program today. He's got red eyes because the males and females have different colored eyes. This particular species of box turtle lives in the southeast United States in places like Georgia, Florida, the Carolinas. And in these places, they like to live. Pardon me while I get our thing back there, our little camera. They like to live in the hot, humid forests in those states. So that means that here at ZooMontana, Rocket lives indoors because it's not humid enough in the summer in Montana, and it's definitely too cold in the winter for him to be outside. So there's a nice large habitat here at the zoo where he can dig to his heart's content and get as messy as he likes. Now he is a land-based turtle. That means that he can swim if he has to, but he's not very good at it. He doesn't have webbing between his toes. He doesn't have flippers on his feet. Instead, he has those claws, and those claws are meant for digging tunnels. They spend their time mostly on ground or underground. I think we talked about that last time, and the word for that is fossorial, F-O-S-S-O-R-I-A-L. And that word means that they spend time underground. So they are semi-fossorial. They spend time on land and underground. They can spend time underground if it gets too cold for them, because that ground will help insulate them and keep them warm in the winter. Or if it's getting too hot in the summer, or if there's a fire, they can dig a tunnel underground and be safe that way as well. Now, these turtles can live quite a long time. Box turtles like Rocket here in the wild can live up to about 20 years. And that's because once they reach adult size, basically nothing can mess with them. And he is adult size, by the way, with our handy dandy ruler here. From the tip of his tail to his head when he sticks it out, he's about 6 inches long. So he's not a very big turtle. And he's only about probably 2 inches tall, 3 inches tall. He's not a very big turtle. So he has to survive in other ways. And we talked about that shell earlier, and that shell is what helps him to survive. One of the ways that his shell helps him to survive is that it's a big bony plate that's on his back, right? But most turtles, their shell is made up of 2 parts. The top part is called the carapace. And the bottom part is called the plastron. Okay? One solid piece on the bottom, one solid piece on top. And this is how turtles protect themselves. They pull their arms and legs and their head and tail in and hope for the best. Box turtles, as you might guess from their names, have a bit of a special shell. If you look at this shell again, it's one solid piece. But if you look at his belly, you'll notice he is in 2 pieces with a hinge in the center. That hinge in the center is connected to muscles and tissues. So just like when you flex your arm or flex your muscles and your arm moves, when he flexes his belly muscles, they can close up his shell on both sides like a box. They only really do this when they're spooked, but look at this picture here. This is this is how they look. They can close up on both sides so tightly that no predator can get into them. And this means that they can be safe from just about anything once they're adult size. They do hatch out of their shell, hatch out of their egg with their shell already on their body, because their shell grows with them, just like your bones grow with you. I mentioned earlier that turtles are reptiles and reptiles are vertebrates. So they have a backbone like this in the background here. But a turtle's backbone is a little bit different. Their backbone looks like this. So you can see the backbones in the center, and then the lines that you can see across there, those are the rib bones. So essentially, the ancestors of turtles, their ribs grew wider and wider until they formed the shell all around their body. So that means that they're born with their shell on, it grows with them just like your bones grow with you, and they can't come out of their shell when they're alive. But they also don't need to, because it helps protect them, keep them safe from predators, and it's their home that they carry on their back. Now, that's also why turtles tend to be a little bit slower than other animals of similar sizes, because the way their body is set out kind of side to side like this, and a big shell on their back, it kind of makes it difficult for them to move fast unless they're in the water. As you can see, he wants to walk around, so he's going to move around here a little bit maybe. You can kind of see he can move a bit faster. We are going to make sure it doesn't fall off of our counter here, just because his eyesight is not that good. But they do have decent short-term eyesight, and they also have a pretty good sense of smell, and that's how they find most of their food. And again, he is an omnivore, which means he eats just about anything, from fruits and vegetables and leaves, all the way up to insects and even maybe baby mice, little mice. So he is quite a good hunter once they're an adult. When they hatch, they're only about the size of a golf ball. So they are a good mouthful for a raccoon or another type of animal that's like that size. And they don't have parents to protect them. So that's usually what happens to them when they're little. But if they make it to this size, no predators where they live can really get to them. So they're pretty safe once they're adult size. Rocket here is 24 years old, and he will probably live into his 30s or 40s here with us at the zoo, because he gets a pretty nice life here. All right, Miss Ray, are there any questions so far about our turtle friends?
There aren't any questions, but I see that we have 3 friends watching.
Wonderful.
So if you have any questions about these wonderful box turtles, please let Katie and Brooke know, because I bet they have your answers.
You can definitely try. Definitely type your questions into the comments on the Facebook post there, and we will do our best to answer. One fun fact about the reason that they are tied into their shell is because it's that backbone, is that they can also feel it when you touch their shell. When turtles are, because the turtle shell is a part of their body, just like you can feel it when someone touches your back, they can feel it when you touch their back. So if you ever do find a turtle, make sure you're very gentle with it, because they can feel it. All right, friends, I think he's ready to head out. So if there's no questions, we'll do one more close-up of him, and then we will head out. Let me see. All right, oops. There we go, friends. Look at that cute little turtle. So he is called a three-toed box turtle because of this back foot here. He has 3 toes on that foot, and he has 5 toes up front. So that's why scientists called him a three-toed box turtle. All right, friends. We get our camera fixed back this way. Perfect. All right. Y'all are doing great, and I'm super excited to keep going. I'm going to clear off my counter from some dirt. Now, one of the many cool things about turtles and many other reptiles too, is that the temperature at which the eggs are kept determines whether the baby that hatches is a boy or a girl. Now, in many animals, this is determined genetically. It's what is passed on from the parents. But in turtles, if it's a higher temperature in some species, it means it's a boy. And if it's a lower temperature, it means it's a girl, or vice versa in different species. So that's one of the things that's really interesting about turtles, on top of a lot of other things. They're also pretty closely related to crocodiles, which is interesting because they don't look much like crocodiles at all. All right, my friends, we are moving on to another group of reptiles. We have talked about turtles, and now we're going to move on to the 4-legged reptiles, which are the lizards. We are meeting our very first lizard. This here is Moana, and Moana is a bearded dragon. Good. Oh, yep. Okay. So Moana here, as I said, is a bearded dragon. If you've seen them before, that is probably because they are very common pets here in the United States, but originally they are from Australia. And in Australia, they live in the deserts. Now we're gonna get a nice close-up of this lovely lizard here. Oops, wrong way, there we go. Look at those eyes. That big hole behind her eyes is actually her ears right here, so she has excellent hearing. Uh-oh. Our video went off. Sorry, friends, I think I pushed a button. There we go. So she has big ear holes here. She has big eyes, and she has big nostrils. She has excellent senses. And she is a omnivore, which means she eats, much like our turtle friend, she eats just about anything. On the front of her face there, I promise that's not blood. I think she had a strawberry earlier today, so she's got a little bit of her lunch left on her face. But that's one of her favorite treats here at the zoo. Otherwise, in the wild, they are finding lots of insects, lots of beetles and worms and other things, and they are chasing them down. She has nice long claws that you can see here on this towel. The reason we have a towel for her is so that she can hold on better. This is helping her feel more stable. So she's got nice long claws on all of her feet. She also has spikes all over her body and some real thick armor right here. Now, those are big adaptations for her to survive in a desert environment as well, for a couple of different reasons. We mentioned earlier that reptiles have dry, scaly skin. So we remember when we talked last week about amphibians. Amphibians have wet, slimy skin that they can breathe and drink out of, or they can push water out of their body. Reptiles can't push water out of their body, and they can't pull water into their body from their skin. So you and I sweat when we get hot, but reptiles can't do that. So they have to control their body temperature in other ways. But that's kind of a good thing for an animal that lives in a desert. Because if you live in a desert, you're going to sweat a lot if you have the ability. And that's going to lose a lot of water. But she doesn't have to worry about that. So she can just relax and make her way around the desert. The spikes on her body serve multiple purposes. One of them is for displaying to other bearded dragons. Bearded dragons are not very social creatures. They do not like to spend time together. Part of that is because deserts don't have a lot of food, and the more animals are around, the more you gotta share. So they spend their time trying to stay away from each other. So the reason they're called a bearded dragon is because of that beard of spikes right there under her chin that you can see. That beard of spikes is pretty relaxed right now because she's calm. But if there was another bearded dragon, or if she was upset about something, she can inflate it or fill it with air. And she can change the scales colors from that light creamy color to a dark black or brown color. This is meant to show off to other bearded dragons saying, hey, I'm big and scary, stay away, this is my food. And that's how they signal to each other. You might also notice the scales on her back here. Oh, I did it again. Sorry, my friends. I'm gonna turn off this thing right here. There we go. All right, the scales on her back here are great armor. They're very thick. But the scales on her belly here and on her neck are much smaller. Still strong, but not as strong as the others. So to compensate for that, she has the spikes around her beard and around her belly. You'll also notice as I'm touching these, I'm not saying ouch, I'm not bleeding. You can see my finger. That's because right now she's relaxed. When she's relaxed, these spikes kind of just hang out. But if she gets scared, she can puff out her air and fling out her spikes. They don't fly off of her body, but they get really stiff. And then they would be very pokey and sharp. So when she's relaxed, she's fine. But if a predator comes flying towards her or running towards her, she can flatten out her body and protect her belly, or puff out her beard and make these spikes nice and sharp to protect her throat. So she has lots of awesome adaptations right off the bat. Now, one of the cool things about many reptiles is that they do lay eggs. And again, they're not particularly good parents, most of them. And bearded dragons are no exception to this. They do lay their eggs, usually in a cool sandy area, and kind of bury them or under some rocks, and then they're on their way. They don't spend a lot of time worrying about their eggs. But they grow pretty fast also. Bearded dragons in the wild tend to live about 8 to 10 years, which means with us here at the zoo, she might live as long as 15 to 20 years or even longer. Now, again, excellent eyesight, excellent hearing, excellent sense of smell. All of these things make her a great hunter of lots of insects or smaller animals. But she has predators of her own. And those predators include dingoes, which are kind of dog-like animals that live in Australia, as well as large hawks and even larger lizards, which are called goannas. So she has to be able to not only look out for her food, but also keep a lookout for the animals trying to eat her and make her their meal. So she has quite a quick and busy life out in the deserts in Australia. All right, Miss Ray, does anybody have any questions about Moana, the bearded dragon?
No questions yet. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. We just wanted to check. Do you have any questions, Miss Ray?
Well, so you shared, what was your box turtle's name? Rocket the box turtle. Okay, and then Moana the bearded dragon. And I was just wondering what kind of turtles and lizards our patrons might encounter in Montana.
Yes, I love that question. So here in Montana, we only have about 3 native species of turtles. We have a soft shell turtle that lives in the waters, and that means that it doesn't have a very strong shell. We have a painted turtle, and we have a common snapping turtle. And those are the only 3 species that live here in the wild in Montana. And then as far as lizards go, we do have, I think there's about 5 or 6. They're pretty small ones, but many of them are spiky like Moana because they typically live in the prairies or in the borderline desert areas here in Montana. And so they need those spikes to not only protect themselves against lots of predators that are much bigger than them, because I think ours only get maybe this big. They need lots of spikes to protect them from predators, and they also need those scales to make sure that they don't dry out, because it's really dry here in Montana, much like it is in Australia. That's an excellent question. I do advise if you do see any of those animals, try to give them their space. If you need to move them away from something, move them in the direction they were going. Don't put them back where you found them. And just try to be very careful because they can be pretty spiky and they can definitely bite. Even turtles, just because they don't have teeth doesn't mean they can't bite. Always wash your hands afterward too, just to be safe. All right, friends, we will go ahead and say goodbye to Moana. Perfect. There we go. Perfect. All right. All right, friends, thank you for your patience. Now, lizards are really cool, and there's tons of species of them. So we wanted to bring you 2 different kinds to show you how different they can be. So we're going to be meeting another lizard, and her name is Steve, and Steve is a leopard gecko. Now, leopard geckos, unlike bearded dragons, so bearded dragons and leopard geckos are both desert animals, but unlike bearded dragons who are found in the deserts of Australia, leopard geckos are found in the deserts of the Middle East, in countries like Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and even into northern India. And all of these areas are typically full of dry, rocky, hot deserts. Now, in those deserts, it can sometimes be too hot for the lizard to come out during the day. So she is actually a nocturnal lizard. And we're going to meet her now. This here is Steve, and I'm going to turn on my lamp back here because I want you to see if we can see these gorgeous eyes. Being a nocturnal animal is beneficial in a few different ways, but she needs some adaptations to help with that. There we go. Look at those gorgeous silvery eyes. Those eyes are part of the reason why she can see so well in the dark. She's got big nostrils there, and she also has holes that are her ears hiding behind her eyes, and we'll see those a bit in a minute too. But I just wanted you to see how gorgeous her eyes are, kind of like a starry night to me. You'll also notice that she has little bitty tiny claws right there on the ends of her toes. And this is a really important thing too, because if you've ever heard of geckos, you probably have heard of the geckos that can climb straight up a wall, or maybe even upside down on the ceiling. This gecko can definitely not do that because she has claws instead of the sticky toe pads of other geckos. So instead, she has claws because in a sandy or rocky desert, having sticky toes is not going to be very helpful. So she uses those claws to run across those surfaces. Now, you might also notice that she has lots of bumps all over her body. She's called a leopard gecko because she's got spots on her tail, which we'll show you here in a moment. But the bumps on her body are armored scales that help protect her body. I'm going to turn off our little lamp here for a second. There we go. It's not as bright now on her. But Steve the leopard gecko is quite a voracious hunter herself. She is primarily what we call an insectivore. So unlike Moana, who will eat veggies as well as bugs and other animals, she eats almost only bugs. And she will hunt for them at night. She's a nocturnal hunter. She has excellent eyesight. Not only does her eyes really pretty, but the fact that she has the slit pupils, or the pupils that look like a line, that helps her gather light even in low light conditions. So she is able to see even in low light conditions to hunt for her food. As you can see, she's also got lots of energy, so she's moving around pretty well too. And she's nicknamed a leopard gecko, not only for the spots on her tail, but because she's a very good hunter. I mentioned she has the armored scales, and that's partly to help her, but those armored scales are pretty small. These geckos don't tend to live very long in the deserts. Their average lifespan in the wild is only about 5 to 8 years. And that's just because they're so small that everything tries to eat them, from the hawks and foxes all the way to other lizards and snakes and just about anything bigger than them. And for reference, here's our little ruler again. She is about 9 inches long with her tail, so she's pretty small. And we didn't measure Moana for you, but Moana is over 18 inches long, so she's half of Moana's size. So she has lots of predators that she has to watch out for. Now that tail is one of her best adaptations. Moana's tail is full of armor, which is really helpful, but it's not particularly strong. And if something bites her tail, she can't get it back. So instead, she has to deal without her tail if an animal bites it. But Stevie here, her tail has 2 different functions. The first one is as fat storage. This is really important for a desert animal. Much like a camel who has fat in its hump, if she has to go a long time without eating or finding enough water, she can store fat in her tail. And that tail will just hold on to it. It'll keep getting bigger as long as she has enough food. And then when she can't find food, she'll reabsorb the fat in that tail to help feed her and keep her hydrated until she can find a meal again. So not only it's kind of like having a backpack full of food on a hike, but it also helps her defend herself. She has teensy tiny little teeth that are only really good for biting insects. So she has to defend herself in other ways. One of those is just by being very fast. When she wants to, she can run very fast. But the other way is with that tail. She can purposely drop off her own tail. Just like if you could accidentally or purposely drop off your own arm, she can drop off her own tail. She has what's called a fracture point at the base of her tail that's activated by the nerves in her body. When she gets scared or if something grabs that tail, she can activate that point. And when that happens, it's a big bloody mess because it tears off the tail and it's super scary. But if she survives that, and if the predator follows her tail instead of her, she can run away to live another day. Now, this losing her tail thing is not unique to this species of gecko. Many gecko species can do this, and many other lizards can too. Like I said, Moana probably wouldn't die if a predator bit off her tail. But unlike most other lizards, leopard geckos can regrow their tail so that she can keep adding that fat storage and making sure that she survives lean times in the deserts. You can see she's sticking out her tongue a lot. Her tongue is not quite like a snake, so it doesn't smell super well, but she can sense her environment. As you see, she just licked Brooke's hand. So she does use it to sense her environment a little bit. One of my favorite things about geckos is how they move. Will you put her on the counter for a second? Okay. All right, so watch how she moves, my friends. She kind of moves her legs together first before she moves them away from each other. So if you ever try crawling, we crawl very differently than she does, and it's really cool to watch them move. So great night vision, great sense of smell, and just a generally good predator. Oops, sorry, friends. There we go. Back on Brooke. All right, Miss Ray, are there any questions about our leopard gecko friend?
Nope, there aren't.
That's okay. No problem, friends. We do not have any gecko species that live here in Montana, but a lot of people have them as pets. So if you have a friend who has a leopard gecko, they might look a little bit different. They're, like I said, very common as pets here in the United States. In the wild, their populations are doing pretty well. Like most animals, they are threatened a little bit by climate change, but for the most part, they are doing pretty well in the wild. All right, my friends, she's really cool, but we have 2 more animal friends to meet. So if you want to wave goodbye on your screen to little Steve here. Now we've talked about lizards and we've talked about turtles. There are tons of different reptiles out there. And in fact, I'm going to tell you how many there are because this number always boggles my mind. How many reptile species? Oh, there are over, let's see, 10,000 species of reptiles. That's almost as many as bird species. It's so cool. And reptiles are super different, even though they often share a lot of characteristics. One of those characteristics that they share is being cold-blooded. And I remember I said earlier, that's one of those things. Cold-blooded is a very important thing for many reptiles because it determines where they can live. Cold-blooded doesn't mean that an animal's blood is always cold. What it actually means is that their blood temperature changes based on the world around them. The scientific word for cold-blooded is ectothermic, which means outside heat or outside temperature. And that means that the outside world controls their internal body heat. We are endothermic or warm-blooded animals, inside heat animals. Some of the energy from our food helps us keep our blood at 98 degrees. That's why you shiver when it gets cold because your blood's trying to stay warm. And that's why you sweat when it gets hot because your blood is trying to cool down and stay at 98 degrees. Reptiles can't sweat and they can't shiver accidentally. Sometimes they'll shiver their muscles on purpose, but their body doesn't automatically do that for them, and they don't do it to warm up their blood. Their blood temperature varies based on the environment around them. That's why you don't have many snakes here in Montana. Here in Montana, we have about 11 species of snakes that we can see, and most of them hibernate for a good portion of the year because it's too cold most of the time for them to be out. Because once they get too cold, then they can't move very well. Snakes can also, and other reptiles, including the lizards and turtles, can also get too hot. That's why Stevie, the leopard gecko, is a nocturnal animal. In the deserts where she lives, it's too hot during the day. She would get overheated. So most of the time she comes out early morning, late night, or she'll come out in the middle of the night instead of during the day. Now we're going to meet our first snake friend, and this one is from right here in Montana. This here is Mesa, and Mesa is a Sonoran gopher snake. Now, the other word for gopher snake is bull snake. So if you've seen bull snakes before, they look pretty similar to Mesa here. You'll notice though that I said Sonoran gopher snake. Sonoran means that he's from the Sonoran Desert in Arizona and California. Bull snakes and gopher snakes it's the same thing. They live almost throughout most of the United States, especially west in the United States. So they live in Montana, they live in California, Idaho, Wyoming, basically all over the West. And in different areas, they can look different. This is called geographical variation. So here in Montana, if you've seen a bull snake, chances are it was darker than this snake here. His scales are pretty light gray or light brown. And that's because in a desert, like we talked about, there's plenty of heat. And if you've worn a white shirt on a hot day and then a dark shirt on a hot day, You might have noticed that your dark shirt makes you feel much hotter, much quicker. That's because those colors absorb sunlight and warmth much faster. In a desert, you don't need to absorb any more heat than you already have because it's already very hot. But here in Montana, the bull snakes need to absorb as much heat as they can. So their stripes are usually much darker here in Montana because they need the heat to keep their body at the right temperature. All right, friends. Now, Mesa here is about 6 feet long and he weighs about 4 pounds. And he's a pretty good sized snake. But I'm going to give you a second to think about this. Do you think that he could eat Miss Brooke right here? What do you think, Miss Ray? Do you think he could eat Miss Brooke?
I'm guessing no, because he is so much smaller than she is.
You are correct. He might be taller than she is, but he cannot eat her. He can eat something bigger than his own head, though. We like to say with any animal that we work with that anything with a mouth or teeth can bite. Birds can bite, snakes can bite, dogs and cats can bite, you can bite. But most of the time, an animal's not going to bite unless there's two things. Either you smell like their food, or they're super scared of you and feel like they can't get away from you. You might notice she's not hurting Mesa right now. He's just hanging out. She's letting him move however he wants, and right now he just wants to hold still. So he feels safe with us. He's been doing these programs for a long time. Also, she doesn't smell like mice or rats today, so we're safe there too. He's very unlikely to bite her, and he definitely cannot eat her. However, like I said, he can eat something bigger than his own head. Snakes have some very special tools for survival in their jaw. I remember I said earlier, those adaptations, those tools, every animal has them. And in your jaw is meant for chewing things. If you put your fingers right here on your cheek and then bite down, some muscles are going to move. Those muscles help you chew your food up nice and easy because our throats don't stretch. We also only have one bone in our jaw because we don't need more. But snakes have 4 bones in their jaw and super stretchy and strong muscles in their jaw as well. So let me kind of show you what I mean. In their jaw, they've got 2 in the back here that allow them to open up super wide, kind of like hyperextending your arm. So they can hyperextend their jaw a little bit. And then the 2 front bones in their jaw have a gap in the center that's connected with some very stretchy tissue. And so when they open like this, the bottom part can open as well to help push their food into their mouth. And then their throat, muscles, and skin are very stretchy, and they can eat things bigger than their heads. To put this in human terms, if I had the chin and the neck of a snake, I could swallow something as big as my shoulders. So for reference with our little ruler here, I could swallow something, probably 18, I could swallow Moana whole. Just swallow her whole, or maybe a giant pumpkin or a giant watermelon. I can't do that, obviously, right? For a giant pumpkin or watermelon, we have to cut those up to eat them. But snakes can eat things bigger than their heads, which is super cool to think about. Snakes also have lots of teeth, even when they are not venomous. He is a constrictor snake, which means he has lots of teeth, but no venom in those teeth. And he squeezes his food until it's dead. He mainly uses his sense of smell for finding his food. And you might already know this, but snakes have nostrils just like we do, but they don't use them for smelling. They use those for breathing. Instead, they use their tongues. You might notice he's got his tongue flicking in and out here. That tongue there is how he's smelling. Seems kind of weird, right? But that's because smells are just chemicals in the air that we can't see, but we can sense them with our noses. He happens to just sense them with his tongue. So when he flicks his tongue out, it is forked because it helps him gather more smells and also can tell him what direction a smell is coming from, if it's stronger in one way or the other. And he pulls it back into his mouth, and he has a specialized organ on the roof of his mouth called the Jacobson's organ. The Jacobson's organ is basically this computer-like organ that helps tell his brain what he's smelling so that he can go after his food, which is usually gophers, prairie dogs, small rodents for the most part. And that's how he helps protect himself and also find his food. All right, friends. Do we have any questions?
No questions.
No questions. Miss Ray, while we're kind of waiting to see if anyone does have questions, can you tell us what the kits are this week?
Oh, yes. We have a paper chain snake this week. That's a 2 or 3 years and up project. And we also, well, we had shrink-eating turtles, but unfortunately, all of the shrink-eating turtle kits have been given away now.
Oh, awesome. That's so cool, though. Thank you. All right, my friends. We have one more friend to meet. So if you'd like to wave goodbye to Mesa, we have lots more to talk about with snakes. Snakes have so many cool things, and so do lizards and all the other animals. And this particular snake that we're going to meet is not from here in the United States. So it'd be pretty cool to talk about him. I do want to say that in general, snakes are pretty harmless to people. Most of the time, the animals are only going to come after us if they feel like they can't get away from us, right? One of the things that gopher snakes will do to help defend themselves against people or against coyotes or other animals is they pretend to act like a rattlesnake. Rattlesnakes, as you probably know, are venomous. They have nice large fangs that have lots of venom in them, and they're particularly dangerous to most animals. They also have a rattle on their tail. As you probably saw, Mesa does not have a rattle on his tail, but when he gets scared, he has special ribs in his throat here that he can flatten out to make his head look more like a rattlesnake. He also will hiss super loud to try to sound like a rattlesnake, hissing and shaking its rattle. He'll even take his tiny little tail with no rattle on it and rattle it against some grass or rocks nearby, hoping to sound enough like a rattlesnake to trick his predators into leaving him alone. So many animals will trick another predator or try to pretend that they are something else to keep themselves safe. All right, my friends, we are going to meet our very last animal friend. This here is Harry, and Harry is a ball python. Ball python, as in B-A-L-L, they are from Central and Western Africa in the grasslands, and they are a nocturnal predator. Now, much like Mesa, he has the ability to squeeze his food. He's got lots of sharp teeth. He's got a jaw that can open up super wide, but you can see even better with him how much bigger than him he can eat. I'm going to gently kind of cup his head here so you kind of see, hi, buddy. This is how small his head is. It's about the size of 2 adult thumbs put together. You see, like this. There you go. 2 adult thumbs put together. He's got a pretty small head. But the biggest part of his body, down here, is about as big around as a small apple. So 2 thumbs versus a small apple. He can eat something this big. And a lot of the time, he is eating larger rodents. And this is really important because, remember we talked earlier about cold-blooded and warm-blooded animals? He hunts at night when it's kind of cooler out. He has the ability to see into the infrared light system, or things that give off heat. We are warm-blooded animals. Because our blood is always warm, we give off a certain amount of heat or infrared light. He can sense that light because he has something called heat pits. We're going to show you those on his face. Let's see if he'll let us do that. He's kind of exploring everything today. All right, so you see, let's see if it'll focus on him. Here we go. He's got itsy bitsy little holes right there on the top lip there. They're kind of pinkish. Those little holes are not wounds. Those are his heat pits. So he can sense heat changes around him. That's how he finds most of his prey. He's an excellent hunter. He does have a good sense of smell, just like our friend Mesa, but he mostly uses his sense of heat. So he'll sleep during the day and then he will hide. And at night, he will wait for prey to come running by him that's nice and warm. And when he can sense that, he'll grab that prey. Now, as a nocturnal animal, much like Stevie, he has slit pupils or lined pupils. Remember Moana's eyes? You got to see those nice and close, and Mesa's eyes. They both have round pupils. Much like us, round pupils means that they're best at seeing during the daytime. But animals like Steve the leopard gecko and Harry the ball python, they are nocturnal, so they have the slit pupils to help them gather light in low light conditions. All right, my friends, we're going to talk about scales now, because scales are super cool. They're also a defining factor of reptiles, because most other animals have pretty different skin-like structures. We have some videos on that we can tell Miss Ray about too, to send to you. Okay, we're going to get nice and close again because scales are just so cool. Now, one of the common myths about scales, and in particular snakes, is that snakes are slimy. And I'm happy to tell you they are not. Miss Brooke will show you, she'll touch him with her hands, and then she'll show you he is not slimy at all. Instead, his scales are shiny. His scales are shiny because they're made of something called keratin. Keratin is the same material that you and I have in our fingernails and in our hair, and it's very strong, and can be quite shiny, but it also is not slimy. These animals, again, they don't sweat and they also don't soak water into their body. So their scales are a thick shield against all of that. So they are not slimy unless they've been in the water. Now, scales are also helping not only protect their body, but helping them move, because scales on the top here will protect his body, at least fairly well. As you can tell, your fingernails are quite strong and their scales are quite strong too. This also explains why snakes have to shed their skin every once in a while. As snakes get larger, those keratin scales, which are so good at armor plating and protecting them, don't stretch very well. So to grow bigger, they have to shed their skin with slightly larger scales. Now we're talking about these top scales here, and they are kind of almost diamond shaped, or maybe, oval shaped, but his belly scales are much different. If Miss Brooke will show us his belly scales, I'll kind of show you what we're talking about here. See how they are lines instead of circles? These lines here are what help him to move. And the reason that this works is much like if you are army crawling along the ground, and AKA just dragging yourself along the ground with your arms, you're just using these lines to help you move. So snake scales will move apart like this, and then drag the rest of the scales up, and then move apart, and then drag the rest of the scales up like that to help them move across lots of surfaces. Snakes also have tons of muscles, and those muscles help them be very strong. They help you kind of like if you've ever been ice skating or roller skating, you push off of one foot onto the other and keep pushing back and forth to move. That's how their muscles help them move too. So snakes have some really awesome ways that they can move. Excellent senses, excellent body shapes, and protection too. Now in his name is a behavioral adaptation, or something that he does that helps him to survive. Remember I said earlier, he's called a ball python. And that's because when he gets scared, he rolls his body into a ball and hides his head in the middle. Much like if you start to roll down a hill, you try to protect your head, because your head can get damaged pretty easily, but the rest of your body can take a few bruises. Same with his body. If his body gets scratched by a predator or maybe even bitten, he has a higher chance of surviving than if his little bitty head gets bitten. So he has to protect his head however he can. As you can see, he's just hanging out. He's just having a good time on this counter. Fun fact, Harry here is the oldest animal at the zoo, and his birthday is coming up. He's going to be 27 years old, the oldest animal that lives here at ZooMontana. So he is a pretty awesome snake. He's been doing programs like this for most of his life. He's an excellent teacher. All right, my friends. Are there any questions on your end, Miss Ray?
No questions.
Awesome.
It kind of surprises me. You don't have any questions about the snakes?
I know. We saw 3 different kinds or 5 different kinds of animals and 3 different kinds of reptiles. We saw lots of cool things.
Wow. What if people post comments or questions later, and then maybe I can send you an email about them?
Absolutely. I am happy to answer them that way as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing these animals. Can we give Katie and Brooke a round of applause?
Thank you, friends. I hope you enjoyed learning a lot about our animal friends. Hi, Karen. And I want you to remember, we still have a couple more. Actually, one more, right? One more next week, right, Miss Ray?
Yes, one more next week. We do have a comment. It's from Carly. She says, "We love your presentations. Thank you so much."
Thank you, Carly. We're so happy that you like them. We're so happy that Miss Ray called out to us so that we could do these with you.
And thank you so much for doing this, because, Billings, I mean, it's not that far away, but it's definitely far enough away that we might not all be able to make it over there. Exactly. So thank you for bringing the zoo to us.
Our pleasure. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today, and have fun with your kits, and we'll see you for next week's program. I'm so excited for the animals that you're going to meet.
Yes, and next week, what animals are we going to be meeting?
We are meeting birds and mammals. Both of them are warm-blooded, but from there, the differences are great. So we're going to talk about all sorts of really cool things about birds and mammals, and you're going to meet a few of them as well.
Very cool. Well, we will see you next Wednesday afternoon at 1:30. Thank you so much.
Sounds good, my friends. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.